The following interview is part of the Price of Freedom project by the Madison County Military Heritage Commission to inform and enlighten young people and the community as a whole about the sacrifices made by those in the military on battlefields around the world. We'd like to thank the Huntsville School System and the ETV Broadcast Center for their help in presenting this Military Heritage program. Hello everyone, I'm Tom Kellemer. Joining us today is U.S. Army veteran Jimmy Wilson. Jimmy is the recipient of the Army Commendation Medal with Valor for his heroism while serving in the Republic of Vietnam in the early 1970s. He was inducted into the Madison County Military Heritage Hall of Heroes in 2014. Jimmy, it's a pleasure to have you with us today, sir. Thank you for your time. Appreciate you being with us.
Pleasure to be here.
First of all, let me ask you, you did grow up right here in North Alabama, Jackson County, I believe, isn't that right? Tell us a little about your childhood.
Well, that's right. I was actually born up near Stevenson, Alabama.
And up on the mountain. I believe that's on the mountain, right?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah,
and then we later moved into Scottsboro, where I grew up in Scottsboro, and until I left for the military.
Yeah. Did you go to Scottsboro High School? Is that where you went?
Yes.
Now, did you have family in the military, Jimmy?
Yes, Tom. I had three brothers, older brothers, and actually Clarence was the oldest brother, and that was much earlier. But then Clyde and David also. Clyde joined the Marine Corps, served 6 years, one tour duty in Vietnam as well. Mm-hmm. And then my brother David was drafted into the Army, and he served a tour in Vietnam. And then about a year after they returned home is when I was drafted.
I see. The younger brother had to go too, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Followed the big brothers. Now, you were drafted. Did you have any idea you might be called up, or what was your feelings on that?
Well, you know, at that time, it was a draft.
What year again was this?
It was 1969.
69, okay.
And everybody looked for a letter, a postcard.
Checking out that mailbox every day.
And so you expected it. You grow up that way, and we were in the battle in Vietnam. So, yeah, we expected that.
Now, tell us about your basic training. Was it tough? What was that like for you, and where was it? Was that Fort Jackson?
No, Fort Benning.
Fort Benning, okay.
I was sent off to Fort Benning, Georgia, and it was tough. Those drill sergeants are there to make your life miserable in a way. That's what it seems like. Yeah. But what they're actually doing is building you up, muscling you up, but then they also have training. They put you through a lot of training and chain of command. You actually have to get taught how to dress and present yourself as a soldier, right, with all your hardware in the right place and polished and shining your shoes and everything. Yeah. So, and then extra training because in basic, it's not a particular MOS. Everybody goes in the Army goes through a basic. Mm-hmm. So this is something that's, tuned for all MOS.
Yeah, everybody, across the board, yeah. Now, were you in pretty good shape when you went to Fort Benning, first of all? What were you doing? What kind of work were you doing for you?
Well, as a youngster, you're doing all kinds of stuff, odd jobs, some of them were digging trenches for the footings of a house or a building, and some pretty hard labor. Right. But, and others, I was actually operating the film projector at Ritz Theater. And in the evenings, and for a little extra side jobs.
A little extra money.
Yeah.
Now, how old were you when you were drafted, Jimmy?
19.
19 years old. Now, what were you trained to do? What was your specialty after you left Benning, or when you were going through basic at Benning?
Okay, basic training, as I said, was generic for all soldiers, but I actually went through another group of training. It was advanced infantry training, and that was at Fort Polk, Louisiana. Okay. Now, Fort Polk, you're in a group of soldiers that everybody's the same group pretty much, MOS is 11 Bravo, which is a foot soldier, and they're training you to be a soldier in war, basically, and at that time it was in the Vietnam War. So they take over from where the basic starts and carry you further and do a lot of extra training on you know, how to disassemble and reassemble all the weapons and fire well and all that. But they also teach you, you know, they go a little bit into the bigger stuff, like the grenades, you know, and teach you all about grenades, how to throw them in safe zones around them. They also teach you what a claymore mine is and how to set one up and what's in it that makes it so dangerous. They teach you about C4 in Vietnam. We used a lot of C4. You're in a jungle, and the primary purpose for C4 is to blast trees down so that you can get a helicopter in for picking up wounded, per se. But they also teach you about the enemy, you know, and where you're going to be, and you know, the AK-47, distinct sound, you know, and you can tell it from U.S. weapons right now, and you know you're ducking right now. But they also teach you about like the B-40 rockets and some of their booby traps. In particular, a lot of booby traps were nothing but a hole in the ground with a sharp bamboo sticks inside the hole, and they would do everything they could to make that violence.
Camouflage it, yeah.
Yeah, sure, but they would try to get hard to pick the right word now, but they make it so that it's full of germs, let's say.
Oh, yeah.
So that when you step into that hole, you may penetrate the skin and it's not serious, but then anything
it will develop into something.
That's right, and so they've done a good job with a cheap weapon there to get you out of the country potentially.
Yeah.
So,
Jimmy, how long was this training at Fort Polk?
3 months in Fort Benning and another 3 months roughly at Fort Polk, Louisiana. And so, yeah, Fort Polk was tough. They teach you a lot about how to be a soldier. Sometimes, you know, at one instance you're put out in the field and left to survive on your own, et cetera, too. So they're really training you to go to war.
Right. Now, after you left Fort Polk, you didn't go directly to Vietnam, did you? Tell us about your experience.
You know, all the time you're going through Fort Polk, you know you're going to Nam. I mean, that's really the feeling. And I go to check the roster, and guess what? I got sent to Germany. Well, maybe I won't go. Well, but so I go to Germany, and there I was in a mechanized unit under the 4th Armored Division. And, you know, of course, then I also was a pretty good mechanic. So I quickly associated myself with the guy who was in charge of the maintenance shop for the APCs, et cetera, all the heavy equipment. And got promotion again up to Spec 4. And then, well, eventually this guy goes home, okay, the guy that was in charge. And so I wound up getting an assignment as a Spec 5, but it was acting, okay. So anyway, I took over the motor pool.
I see.
Then I guess it was like June or July time frame, you know, I got my levy to Vietnam, and it got there before the actual appointment to E5. So I didn't get to change my MOS or anything, so here I was. So I went to Vietnam.
This was 1970 then, I guess.
1970, about August or somewhere along in there, September, I think.
So your next stop would be Vietnam, and tell us, first of all, what outfit were you attached to, and what was your impression, Jimmy, when you first landed in Vietnam? I mean, you're in a war zone now, and you're not back in Alabama and everything. What's your thoughts? What's going through your mind?
Well, it's a whole different thing. You're landing. There's this. You know, we first landed in Cameron Bay.
Right.
And it's a huge post for an awful lot of people coming in and going out of Vietnam. Yeah. And so it was military barracks, you know, and nothing special. It was
nothing
put
fancy.
Together quick.
Right.
And
a lot of turnover there, wasn't it?
A lot of turnover. But so I didn't stay there very long. I got signed and sent up to Chu Lai. And from Chu Lai, of course, I was assigned to my company, and that was I was in the Delta Company of the 1st Battalion, 46th Infantry.
Okay.
Of the 23rd Infantry Brigade. or
That's
division, I guess it was.
Near Chulai. Now explain to what part of Vietnam is that? Sort of in central?
That's in northern Vietnam.
Northern Vietnam.
It's
okay.
not,
All right.
I don't know exactly, but I'd say 20 or 30 miles from the DMZ. It's south of the DMZ.
Yeah.
And it's pretty much we went out directly west onto Fire Base Marianne is where we operated from. And it's a little closer to the routes, but then further west of there was the heart of the travel because, anything going south of us had to come through our territory.
I see, yeah. Whenever you had any free time, let's say after a mission, and what would you do for relaxation? I know it wasn't too often, but what could you do for it? Did you sleep in tents or sleep out on the ground, or what?
No, it's in Vietnam. You're out on a mission, and those missions will go from anywhere from like 20 days on the low end to 40 on the high, and you're there with nothing but what you tote on your back and what you're wearing. You don't have a change of clothes or anything. You do it because everything that you want, you have to tote. So you make that as light as possible. And even then, you're toting extra ammo. You're toting a ammo pack, which you put all your paper in for riding home, and spices, maybe a little hot sauce to doctor up the rations.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
needed a little help in that area.
You have to.
I remember that.
And in the bottom of my rucksack, I always carried 2 or 3 bags of rice because rice is light, and you never know when the time's going to come when you're going to run out of food. And that was, not regular, but it was more often you want. The longest I had was over 15 days, and we fell back to the rice, and some guys were eating roots. There were plants, you could boil and eat, but, that's when the hot sauce come in handy. But, we were in the bush, and it was a mission, and it was in the military, and the only time you really got any time, because we were either moving or on light patrols, was if we set up a central night logger, let's say, and we were going to be there for 3 or 4 days and doing night patrols.
It's kind of like a camp.
Okay. And so you're going and coming, and sometimes you have some free time, and and then of course always in the evenings after you've got everything set up, you got a little free time. But not a lot to do, The guys, most of us would have a deck of cards, and we'd play cards or,
Got to get your mind off of things for a little while anyway.
And that was the biggest pastime, was playing cards.
Now, that 15 days, that was without a shower, I'm sure, right?
Oh, yes. Time when you come in, and like I said, at one time it was that upper towards the 40 days, and your clothes are so worn out from being rained on and walking in water and through the jungles and leeches and all over you and all, that you can literally pinch holes in your cloth, your pants, for example. Right. They literally ride on your body.
Yeah. Worn them so long.
Yeah. And so you go back to the fire base, and you get to shave and shower and get a new uniform, and so. How
long would you have? Like a couple of 3 days off, or just
3? Typically, it would be about 3 days.
Okay.
Sometimes maybe less, like 1 day less or 1 day more. Typically, I'd say. But then you were back off to the bush.
Another mission.
Another mission.
Jimmy, do you stay in touch with any of the guys that you served with to this day?
No, I had the names and addresses of a few of those guys, and then in moving somewhere, I managed to lose them, and I thought a few times about looking up somebody and trying to find them, but I didn't, because you never know if you're going to find out something bad happened to them. So
they're no longer living.
I just
and so forth,
I just didn't follow up. I didn't try to reach out.
Jimmy, tell us about the mission for which you would later receive the Army Commendation Medal for Valor.
That was a tough day, and it was unusual in a sense because we were moving from the territory around Fire Base Marianne into the western direction, which is really getting into the heart of the traffic for the NVA.
Right. Now this is out west of Chulai, right?
West of Chulai,
sure.
and west of Fire Base Marianne.
I see. Okay.
And we were in the Howduck area, or Howduck district, and it was February the 11th, and
1970. 70, right?
Or, no, 71.
71, yes. Okay.
And so the unusual part though was that we were two platoons. I think it was Alpha platoon was ahead of us, and then we were in the Delta, and so we were in the rear, and the lead got into a firefight, and it was a terrible firefight. And you could hear the explosions and all the rifle fire, and screaming, hollering, because there were people got wounded immediately. Those in the point are always going to catch it the hardest and the first. And so it didn't let up at all. And quickly, I realized that they needed some help. And I got my M60 gunner, and he was, good to go. And between us, we took all the ammo we could carry, because everybody carries M60 ammo, and it's heavy, and the M60 shoots up a lot of ammo quickly. So we gathered up as much as we could tote, and steel pot and bandolier ammo, and we go. And we're moving forward, and it was generally uphill. The ambush had hit them from pretty much the top of the hill, and along the way we're trying to stay behind the trees and as much cover as we could, and then stop and get our bearings going on. And I even remember going by the CO, and he was behind the tree with the RTO, and they were cross-checking our position to zero in where we were at. And of course we know what he was up to. Right. And we quickly went along, and after another dozen or so steps, there was a couple of B-40 rockets hit to my left, and we got the jungle all over us. We're lucky we didn't get wounded, so we brushed off and kept going. And I guess it was maybe another 75 or 100 yards we reached to where we knew it was, because the gunfire was right immediately in front of us, and people to the left and right shouting still and hollering for more help. And so we sat down behind a little knoll, and just a little protection for the M60 gunner, and he's getting us ready to open fire, and then I'm taking all my ammo and linking it and getting it ready for him to use. And then I move over to the left about 20 feet or so, and a body laying there, a person, and I got behind a tree with a little protection and open fire. Okay, but the boy was hollering for help and screaming, and and I turned and was shouting for medic, medic. And I did that several times, and none came, and it just got worse. And I crawled over to him and tried to talk to him, and
comfort him any way you could.
Him, and then you want to cover the with bandages, but there's just literally
shot to pieces, really.
Yeah, and so I quickly go back because there's still firefights going on. So he passed. He went into shock, I think, and passed away.
I see. Before a medic could get there, right?
And so we're back into the battle, and that went on. I lose track of time sometime, and then after a while, though, the captain or the commander had managed to everything, and so artillery was in the air. And when they do that, we got a splashdown. And when you got that, me and the M60 gunner, we're both up and we're running away from the blast zone. And you're trained into, you count 1001, 1002. You got about 4 seconds, and your next step should be going down. And that's exactly what I did to try to somewhat out of distance of shrapnel from the explosion. But and I could see the explosion with my M60 gunner going down just a few seconds behind me, maybe. And but quickly from there was a lot of 155 rounds hitting the ground, and of course that changed the condition of the fight, of the battle. And we regrouped after that was over, and I was in the group that went up the hill with several others to try to, check for any more enemy or wounded or dead. And we tracked them for, I guess, half a mile or so, and we were called back because they really didn't want us to get into another battle at that time, and they had gone quite a bit of distance, so we recovered.
Was it a lot of enemy dead as well, Jimmy?
No, we didn't find any, and at that point, of course, I don't know if we were looking all that good, but we were mostly looking for any movement and such. But the good thing, smart thing for them is just like we do. Whenever we set up an ambush, we try to get it so that we've got an exit. And so they were at the top of the hill and went down the other side. But we came back, and at that time, and they'd already received bags, and they were collecting the dead, and
we helped with that process too, right? You're involved with that process, collecting the bodies.
Yeah, and then we had to get back away from that fire zone. That's the next steps, and so we were all toting the bodies, and we got back to what we considered a little bit more safe zone, and we set up a perimeter. And that's when we blasted. In this case, it was a jungle, as I said earlier. You blast the trees down in order to get access for the helicopters to come in and pick up the
evacuate the wounded. Right.
Yeah.
Did your gunner make it out okay? Was he wounded?
The M60 gunner did get wounded. It wasn't super serious, but it was his left hand, and I don't remember exactly how bad, but it was enough that he got sent back and got to go home from it.
I see.
And but lucky for him, it wasn't more serious.
Wasn't more severe. Jimmy, how would you describe what it's like to serve in war? The thoughts you have of possibly being killed or wounded in battle?
Well, serving in war, you don't spend the whole time, time battling, but you're moving, and you're looking for opportunities to encounter the enemy. So it's always kind of on your mind, but it's also something that while you're going to get into a battle, or you're going to set up an ambush or whatever, you're focusing on what you're doing, and so you're trying to focus on other things other than the thoughts of being killed or wounded. You tried to put that in the back of your mind. You tried to, right? Most of the time when that actually enters our mind is right after a firefight. Somebody is wounded or killed, and you're thinking about them, and you don't just think about them, Tom. It's a different kind of a feeling. Yeah. But he's gone, and his parents don't even know it yet. So it's a tough one. Jimmy, do you feel it's okay to be afraid or scared during combat? Is that normal? Oh, I think it's normal to be scared. The fear is there, but when you're in a battle, part of it is your upbringing or your training or whatever. You're really focused on the battle, and so you get scared at other times afterwards, and I think it's okay.
Who or what do you think prepared you to take the actions you did during the war? Was it your upbringing, your tough drill sergeant, that sort of thing? Who would
all
combination?
I grew up in the country over around Scottsboro, and in our schools at that time, we had a lot more, at least in the earlier grades, of our heritage and like George Washington. You learn, and what happened in the when we won our independence, and became free, and so all that is in your mind,
instilled,
and my parents and brothers, and how we talk about things. But then we also go into the military, and we get a lot of training, and that's I always thought was a good thing, because I also get discipline, which is good for anybody, like a young kids. You want to do your own thing maybe, but sometimes you need a little discipline. So,
do you often wonder, would you do it all over again? Does that cross your mind?
I'm sure I would, Tom. You can never think what the turn of events are going to be, but in my mind, I can't imagine not, because it's something you just feel like is the right thing to do, to not only do your duty, but also to help protect your country,
right, and
keep us free.
Right.
Tom, it ain't a given that we're always going to be free, that we're not going to wind up in a war. I mean, look what's going on around us right now. That
exactly right.
North Vietnam is really built up an ability to hurt a lot of people with those atomic bombs, and they can reach us,
right,
and so it could happen anytime.
How long did you serve in Vietnam? Was it a year or 6 months? How long were you in the country?
The tour in Germany reduced that, so I went, I think, about 8 months, maybe a little bit shy, but it was about 8 months.
So when you're drafted, it's a 2-year enlistment.
Yes, 2 years.
Or you're in service for 2 years.
That's right.
Jimmy, there were protests back home during the Vietnam War. What was your feelings on that, and did you ever encounter any protest when you returned?
Protests did go on, and I that was through most of the 60s, I'd say, and so I was not in the military when I saw most of that going on, but I guess I didn't think much about them, because it seemed like they were, protesting that, we were doing the wrong things. Our government was wrong and wanted to change things, and I don't know, I may have thought that in their minds they were trying to change it so they didn't have to go, maybe. But, I guess I didn't care a lot for that. But then after I went in the military, of course, I didn't get much news about that either. So they were really in my mind then. And when I came home, there was no protesters. I came home and got off that plane, and I got down and kissed the tarmac, I'll tell you. So glad to be home, but no protesters.
Were you discharged as soon as you returned home, or
yes,
when you returned to the States?
Pretty much. All we did was go through the normal paperwork to exit you from the Army and get you scheduled with the tickets and all to go home.
I see. Where was all that?
That was in Washington.
Fort Lewis?
I don't really recall.
Washington State, right.
Yeah,
okay.
Some Washington.
Yeah. Been so long, I understand,
yes,
right. Did you ever consider a career in the military, Jimmy? Was that ever?
No.
Never did you wanted to? No.
I grew up and I knew my duty was to serve, and I did. But, when not only did I kind of have my own imagination about what I would do in life, which wasn't real sure of at that time, I guess. But when you're in the military, you also are controlled and away from home all the time. And I guess I didn't like that, and so I didn't choose any career.
Was it a big adjustment for you coming home after being in combat?
I'd say no. I was glad to get home. And I really didn't have any repercussions of Vietnam or anything, except the one thing that bothered me for a couple of years is if I'm doing something and I'm not focusing on what somebody else is doing, and somebody opens up with shooting a target practice or whatever with a gun, that made me head for cover, and that went on for a year or two, I guess.
I see.
And after that, I was just glad to be home.
Right. During your time serving our country, is there any particular period that stands out in your memory?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of memories that I think about and remember. Of course, in the bush, your leeches are all over you, and at night, it's a jungle, so there's animals, and you hear them, baboons, etc.
Yeah.
And on one occasion, we actually had a tiger, a large tiger, circling our night logger. I guess we got too close to his lair, but I mentioned a heavy rucksack to keep it light. I always used we were in the mountains, so we used a hammock. But I laid there in that hammock with my M16 literally all night long. I don't know if I got much sleep that night, but he didn't come in, thank goodness.
Yeah.
But
that was a little scary time, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, I guess it was.
Had to worry about the enemy as well as tigers, yeah.
But
yeah. After you discharged, what did you do? And I know you became an engineer. You went to Auburn University. Tell us a little about that.
Well, I got out and I went to work pretty quick after the military, and the work though was repetitive, and it was hot. It was a Goodyear plant that made tires, and I was running the drafting machines for the thread or polyester that's used to make the tires. Well,
now was that in Scottsboro or Gadsden?
That was in Scottsboro.
Okay.
And so I didn't care much for that, and I was thinking, well, I need to do something better, different, something that would enjoy my life better, So I thought about it, and I said, well, I'm going to, I need to get a trade, and so I looked into that and thought about it and decided I was going to become a machinist. But then maybe I ought to go back to school. So I first took the job as a machinist and wound up at Scottsboro Machine and Tool, and spent there 4 years there. And I got pretty good at it. It was a good education. But then I also signed up and went to school, and I was doing pretty good. I went into business, and my math was great, and all of a sudden I noticed everybody around me was in business, and so I changed it. And so since I was good at math, I went into engineering. So I wound up graduating from Auburn University in mechanical engineering in August of 1977.
I bet you went on the GI Bill too. Or
I did. I used the GI Bill. Thank goodness for the military, the GI Bill, the benefits.
Now, and after you became an engineer, you worked here in town, I think, for a couple of companies. Is that right?
I did. I went to work for Onan Corporation as an engineer, and of course they made engines and generators, and worked there for about 21 years or so. And they wound up closing the plant, and I had built up to where I was the head of technical services there. And so it really wound up being my job to relocate it. And so I moved all the generator equipment and business up to Minneapolis, which was our home office. And I worked with the VPs and all to try to sell the engine business. The A engine we could not sell, even though we worked with the Chinese and everybody else, but we wound up just demolishing that equipment. And but the gasoline engine we sold to the Linamar Corporation in Canada, and Guelph, Ontario. And so we shut the plant down. That was in, I think, 96, actually closed. But all the people were pretty much gone except material handlers, and then I think they closed the doors in like 98. Then after that, I went to work for Copeland Corporation, and I was working out of Minneapolis, after they closed the plant, and then a lot of, 2 weeks up and back home for a long weekend. I got tired, so I took a job at Copeland as an engineer again.
I see.
Well, you know, with my experience, of course, I was lucky, and I wound up promoting back to wound up being head of the technical services again.
Good.
And I worked there for about 13 years, but then they decided to shut that plant, and they moved the assembly operations to Mexico and sold off the building. So I wound up having to move the plant out of the country.
So you're retired now, right?
And I was part of the deal.
Right.
I said, look, I'm not going to, you know, I don't want to stay to the end. I want to get out and not see all the people's faces when they lose their job like I did at Donan. And so in April of 2011, we got it qualified, and I was laid off as part of the agreement.
I see. Jimmy, tell us about your family. I believe you and your wife, Virginia, have 3 sons, and how many grandchildren?
Oh, 6.
6.
Yeah, Terry, Kevin, and Roger, the 3 boys. And I got Kimberly and Lindsay, Sarah, Jessica, Sarah, Kylie, and Jessica. And then Christopher is the last one, the youngest one, and the only boy.
They keep you busy, I bet, don't they?
Oh,
Y'all live close by? Do they live in this area?
Yes, they all live nearby. Arab, Terry lives at Arab, but that's not that far. Right. And Kevin and Roger live in town. And yeah, I pick up, my fatherly duties is to pick up, you know, granddaughter after school. And but then we also take care of Christopher most of the time, and so he keeps me busy.
Could imagine. Now, I know you're busy with the grandkids. Do you have any hobbies? I know a lot of honeydew projects, that sort of thing.
Well, you know, younger in life, I had a lot of hobbies. I started off, you know, reloading ammunition because when I came home from Vietnam, I brought an SKS back with me, and I couldn't buy ammo, so started, you know, modifying and reloading the case to make the ammunition for the SKS. But then I also hunted, of course, and then fishing was a big pastime because you could do that a lot more months out of the year anyway.
Right.
So me and my brother Harold fished a lot, and my 3 boys, we all go fishing. And then I had a friend that at work that I wound up fishing with, and we still do today. He lives in Florida, and I go down there for a visit. And
good getaway.
And he comes up here in April, so.
Enjoy each other's company.
Yeah,
right.
And I also like golf. I've played golf most all my life.
Yeah.
I still do occasionally, but it's not as easy anymore. You know, I can't really grip the clubs so well anymore.
I see.
But and then the honeydew list, yeah, you know, the neighbors.
Always something going on.
I've cut trees down for the neighbors, or, you know, just repair anything that, you know, install fans, or, you know.
You're the handyman in the neighborhood, right?
Well, I get called sometimes more than I want to.
Jimmy, what would you like for those watching this interview, especially young people, to learn and hopefully remember from your military experience?
Well, I guess I'd think about, you know, the military isn't necessarily easy, but it's also a really, really good education. It's a lot of discipline that's good for, I think, people in life to have more discipline, not less. And, you know, I think that somehow people need to go back and get some of it made back in schools, you know, where the teachers are doing more of our history, and make sure that the children grow up with some honor and respect for our country, and so be willing to support the military and understand that, like we said a while ago, we're not sure that we won't get back into another serious war. I know we've been in a lot of them, in Afghanistan and Vietnam and Iraq, but you know, those are on foreign soils. Nothing says it can't come to our doorstep. So everyone needs to appreciate the military.
Right. Jimmy, thank you so much for participating in our oral history interview series and for allowing us to preserve your military experience for the people of this community. And thank you, sir, for your service to our country. We appreciate it very much. Thank you for being with us. If you'd like more information regarding this interview or any interview in our Military Heritage series, please contact the Madison County Military Heritage Commission website at mcmhc.org.